Hello, everyone, and welcome to Young Women in Medicine webinar. We are joined here with some lovely young women who are in the medical field currently as doctors and also as current med school students. And we hope that this webinar today just helps you realize that there are many different paths to becoming a doctor, and just learning a little bit about what these fabulous young women have done to get themselves to their goal of becoming doctors. So I'd love to start with you guys just introducing yourselves, and telling us where you went to high school, where you went to college, and where you are currently in med school or where you went to med school. So we'll start off with Hansa, and then we'll go to Durga and then Guneet.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this Saturday. I'm Hansa. So I went to Lynbrook High School quite a few years back. And then after Lynbrook, I went to Case Western for undergrad. So I did 4 years at Case Western. And then after Case Western, I went to Tufts in Boston for medical school. And then now I'm an intern, a family medicine intern here in Houston, in Texas.
Awesome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Durga. I also went to Lynbrook. I went to Stanford for undergrad, studied computer science, and I'm a first-year med student here at UCLA.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name's Guneet. I also went to Lynbrook, which feels like many moons ago, played field hockey for Coach Dumas for many, many years. And yeah, went to undergrad at Scripps down here in Southern California, spent a year in graduate school at Columbia, and then now I'm also a first-year medical student at UCLA with Durga.
Awesome. So my next question, and we'll start with Guneet since you're already on the spotlight here, is when did you decide that you wanted to be pre-med or go into medical school?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the pre-med med dream was kind of planted early for me, just from a range of personal experiences. I'm type 1 diabetic, so kind of my own illness narrative and journey was a big part of why I went into medicine. Yeah, so I have wanted to be pre-med for as long as I can remember, but I also want to preface that that's definitely not the case for most of my classmates or most people who are in med school with me. Yeah, it's been a dream of mine for probably 10 plus years, and one that, I'm starting to make steps in the next stages of, but that definitely doesn't have to be the case.
Did you major in pre-med at Scripps, or what was your major at Scripps?
Yeah, I have a little bit of an interdisciplinary background. So yeah, I was like a bio major and a chem minor, very very much on the pre-med track, but also studied feminist gender and sexuality studies with a concentration in critical race studies. So was in a lot of humanities spaces as well.
That's awesome. And Scripps is liberal arts, so you got to have a good breadth of knowledge in school.
Yep, exactly. Love a liberal arts school.
Awesome. And Durga, can you tell me a little bit about when you decided to go pre-med, because you were in computer science undergrad?
Yeah, so I guess I came into college with the starting out pre-med. So I was interested in medicine. I think high school was when I kind of went from like, do I want to do like a PhD, like do that route, or like, do I want to do clinical medicine? So in high school it was pretty like I went in like being like, I want to go to med school. And I think college was interesting because I didn't come in as a CS major. So I came in as a bioengineering major, and thought I wanted to do like that kind of research. Stanford has a big like engineering focus, and I think like where you go to college really does affect your interests as well. And I think doing some computer science classes there really drew me to that. And so I stayed pre-med, did like the pre-med classes, but majored in computer science, and had some like nice CS experiences that I think will hopefully stick with me like through medicine and beyond. So that's kind of how that CS major thing kind of happened.
That's awesome. And then lastly, Hansa, what about you?
I think my story is kind of like Gunit's. I knew I wanted to do medicine quite early on. And like you said, it's definitely not what most people, that's not their path. Usually, most of my friends from med school didn't know until, some of them didn't know until like the last year of college. And, and it's okay, it works out. But for me, I think it was just my parents were both engineers. And I, for some reason, just couldn't imagine myself like sitting behind a computer. That just wasn't appealing to me. I like to talk to people. I like to be up and moving, and I'm not the kind of person who can sit at a desk, and that was just my personality. And so when I was trying to explore like what other things do I like, medicine was just something that my parents, would mention. And I, in high school and stuff, I did a lot of shadowing, and I think that really helped kind of like cement that decision for me because I enjoyed seeing patients. I enjoyed the different like the biology behind it, the ability to either like do a procedure or be in an OR. It was just super cool for me. And so that's kind of what I guess like my path was. But I knew quite early that medicine was kind of where I wanted to be.
And you brought up a great point about high school, which leads me into our next question. And so I'll have you start. What kind of experiences did you get involved with in high school that helped set you up for success in college? Knowing, exploring pre-med or exploring those types of things.
Yeah, definitely. I think high school it's a time when you don't really know what you want to do for most people. It's a time that you have the opportunity to be a part of lots of different organizations that focus on a lot of different things. And it can be a little overwhelming because all of us have like 50 different interests. And there's always an organization for it. There's always something that you could do that is directed at those interests. But I think for me, what I did is I knew I liked biology and things like that. So I was part of, some of the science organizations at Lynbrook. But I also wanted to just explore, I did FBLA. I thought, okay, maybe I would like the business side of things and want to kind of keep my experiences a little bit open and a little broad. So I tried being a part of those kinds of organizations. But once I knew like medicine was really what I wanted to pursue, I tried to do a lot of shadowing or volunteering in hospitals, just to try to get myself more exposed to what the medical field was like. More, I mean, yes, it like adds to your application, but also it's like for me just to know, am I making the right decision? Because med school is a big deal. It's a 4-year commitment. And so I just wanted to make sure that I was definitely 100% sure of that decision. And I think those kind of like shadowing and volunteering experiences really helped for me. But.
Great. And just to the audience, if you guys have any questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll be moderating those throughout, and we'll save them, and open them up in the end. Just so you guys know that we'll be following up with questions. So let's move to Durga. What kind of things did you get involved in high school? I know it feels like a far time away, but thinking back to really set yourself up for college and beyond.
Yeah, I think so one thing that I got involved with freshman year of high school that I think really set me up for, or like let me find out that I like have a really strong research interest was doing that STEM research class we had. I think it was the first year was my freshman year at Lynbrook, but it was yeah, it was great. I think it was like a really cool kind of like intro to what is research. We like did science fair, like all of us presented our project at science fair. And I think for me that was a really impactful kind of experience because that was something that I like continued like through high school, and then also was pretty heavily involved with research in college, and then I see that as something that's kind of continuing for a while. So I think in terms of like medical research, that was something that was really impactful for me. And yeah, totally second what Hansa was saying about the shadowing and volunteering. I think that's like really helpful to figure out early on. Like I guess that's as close to on the job as you can get as a high schooler, right? Because you can't obviously like not qualified to do direct a lot of medical stuff with patients and probably shouldn't. But I think, yeah, the volunteering and shadowing is a really cool way to kind of learn if medicine is like what you want to do. And I think there are also other really fun things to do and explore in high school. Like I did debate for a couple of years, was super fun. I think those are skills you can transfer to like any situation. So yeah, those were some things that were really impactful for me.
Nice. And what about you, Gunit?
Yeah, definitely want to second everything that Durga and Hansa have said. Yeah, was also involved in research pretty early on, did the Silicon Valley STEM internships. I spent a summer interning at one of the Johnson and Johnson startups locally, so in a little bit more of a biotech space. And then, yeah, I was also kind of shadowing. And I think what Hansa said is really important about how, a lot of these experiences, demonstrating your interest is something that med schools definitely value. But I think as a high schooler, like a lot of these parts of the puzzle are really like, these pieces are really for you to figure out if medicine is the right space for you. And this is, a hospital environment or a clinic environment or a service oriented profession is really where you want to end up. I also think, I did a lot of like non-medicine stuff in high school, and that was awesome, and I would never change that. I was really involved with the Amnesty International chapter, like both locally and at our high school, played a lot of sports, and like those are things that are still really big parts of my life, and I think in their own ways also contributed to like kind of my journey into medicine. So I think I don't think there's any kind of like cookie cutter checklist of like the volunteer opportunities that you need to do or the type of research you should be doing. I think it's really all about like kind of like prioritizing experience over everything, and like experiences that you feel like feed your interests, things that you find meaningful. And like ultimately, if like you're meant to be in medicine, which I'm sure many of you are, and many of you will explore, like all those things will come together to kind of inform that path for you.
That's great. Now, if you can remember back this far, when you were looking at colleges initially, can you tell us a little bit about how you made your college decision and what kind of drove that process to making the decision, like what you were looking for in a school? Because you kind of all went to different places and had different paths. And we'll just start with you, Ganeet, since you're on the spot here.
Yeah, absolutely. At the time, that's like the biggest decision up until your life up until that point. I totally remember, being in that seat and thinking about like all the acceptances you're holding and like what different spaces will feed you. Ultimately, I chose Scripps. I knew I wanted to be at a liberal arts school. I knew I had interdisciplinary interests, and I wanted to be in a space that would like feed that and encourage that. I also chose Scripps because the Claremont colleges do have like a pretty high acceptance rate into med schools, and that was kind of something that they marketed and advertised. And just like a lot of those things about smaller class size. The largest class I ever took in college was probably 40 people. That was like an intro science class, which is definitely not the case for they're just laughing. Definitely not the case for a lot of folks at other schools. And so I think choosing a school that was smaller, choosing a school that allowed you to have like all our classes were taught by professors, nothing was taught by TAs, and like really having that like personal one-on-one interfacing time with the professors whose like research I was interested in, wanted to work with. Those were all things I was thinking about at that point. I was like, in the end, I remember I was choosing between Scripps and like a larger kind of like more traditional research institution. Like my time at Scripps definitely really fostered my like interest in gender studies and critical race studies, and like a lot of that academic work also was like a big part of the reason I went to grad school at Columbia. I studied narrative medicine, and so my entry point to that was very much being in these two worlds of like both the sciences and like the traditional humanities. And so I feel like my path would have been really, really different at a different school. Maybe I would have ended up at the same place, but those are all the things that I was kind of thinking about at that point.
Okay, and Durga, what about you? How did you make your college decision?
Yeah, I still remember. I think that those decisions you will remember for a while. I think like college, med school, or grad school, like those things, you'll always remember. But yeah, I was deciding between here versus, or where I ended up going, versus a combined med program, actually. It was an 8-year program, so it was not like I wasn't losing any like time from
Accelerated,
undergrad.
sure.
Yeah, but I think for me I was on the fence about it till the very end. I think for me, it ultimately just came down to how I like felt, like literally felt visiting those places. Because for me, like Stanford just felt like it just felt like home. Like visiting it, like it felt like a really nice, like I really enjoyed being there. I loved all the people I met there. Um, I think for me, it's a question of like, am I willing to like go through the path, like continue being pre-med and like continue working for another 4 years and things like that. Because the combined program also didn't require them to take the MCAT. So that was a decision that I think until the last moment I was thinking about. I have no regrets with my choice. But I will say I think both options are good options. And I would say like my biggest piece of advice would be when you're making that decision, like yes, you can talk to a lot of people who did both routes or did like both programs that you're choosing between. But for me, it just came down to where did I feel happier? And I think that was a good decision. I also wouldn't have had any sort of probably like CS or as strong of a CS interest if I hadn't gone where I did. So I do think like where you go to undergrad really shapes you, as is where you go to med school. But that was kind of my decision. So biggest piece of advice would be like really think about how you feel at both places and use that to, or like factor that in when you're making your decision.
Awesome. And Hansa, what about you? How did you make your college decision?
Yeah, I think I definitely second what Guneet and Durga were saying. It's something that you'll remember. It's a lot of back and forth. It's a lot of like charts of pros and cons and which one has more pros and and there's no like perfect answer. Like but I think every program is great in its own way. It's just where do you think you'll fit in the best? So definitely, I for me it was all about feel. So I was between Case Western and then a bunch of like the UCs, like all the other schools in California. So it was either like leave California or stay in California, which is a huge decision for me because I wanted to stay close to home. I'd never really been like by myself. And this is like in Cleveland, Ohio, like across the country by myself. And it was it was a big choice for me in that sense. Um, but I was looking mostly for just a smaller school. I'm more of an introvert. And so for me, being in a school that had, 10,000, 20,000, like 20,000 students was a little bit overwhelming. So I wanted a school that was a little smaller that I could kind of, get to know most of the people, but not everybody. And then I would have like the space to explore my interests, kind of not feel like I'm one in like a million, just because of my personality. And so that's why Case Western was definitely very appealing for me. I didn't come across it. Someone had just happened to mention it to me. I didn't even know Case Western existed, but they were like, I don't know, but I think the school might be a good fit for you, like based on your personality. It's kind of like the right size. It's the right kind of environment. But I wasn't sure about it. So I just put the application in. At that time, they didn't have any like essays or anything. It was all like merit based or something. So it was an easy application. So I thought, why not just send it in? And then once I found out, I actually went and visited Case Western, and I visited a bunch of the other schools I was thinking too. But I still remember the day I was just walking on campus at Case Western, and I just looked at my mom and I was like, "This is where I want to be." I was like, "This is it," and she was shocked. She was like, "Wait, what? You didn't even go to any of the little lectures? Like you didn't see anything?" And I was like, "No, no, this is it." And it's just something about the feel. Like I felt like this is a place I could thrive, and this is a place where I could really, kind of learn about who I wanted to be and kind of what interest I had. And I definitely don't regret that decision at all. It's like it was the 4 best years of my life. Honestly, I had so much fun. I learned so much. I'm still, all my friends and all the people I know, we're still in touch on almost a daily basis. So I think it's all about really where you feel like you as a person would thrive the best. There's no perfect choice. There's no like one school that'll get you to your dream medical school or anything like that. I think it's just, where do you feel like this would be like, it's more about fit, right? Like which school is a good fit for you? Which school do you think you would be the happiest at and feel the best at? And I think that's the right decision for you.
So let me ask you this, and then we'll start with you, Hansa. When you went to Case Western, did you stay in the same major? What was your major? And then can you kind of talk a little bit about what the environment was like? Was it super competitive? Was it collaborative? What was the feel?
Yeah, definitely. So I did like a dual degree. So I did a Bachelor of Science in biology and then a Bachelor of Arts in psychology. at Case Western, and I knew going in I wanted to do a biology major. The psychology just kind of, I think I took a psych class and I was like, this is super interesting, and I wanted to take more classes, and I figured why not just make a degree out of it if I'm so interested in taking all these classes anyways. But the nice thing about Case Western for me that helped me kind of, pick those majors especially, was that you don't have to declare a major. I'm not sure if it's different now, but when I started, you didn't have to declare a major when you went in. So you only had to declare a major, I think, like end of sophomore or early junior year. So that gave you time to really jump around and kind of try a bunch of different classes, see what you liked, and see if the majors that you came into college with were what you wanted to stick with. And so that was really nice, I think, for me to be able to have that freedom to kind of explore that. And then I could declare once I knew, okay, this is actually what I want to do. And my friend, she went in bio, I think 2.5 years in, completely switched to finance. And it was just like a 180. But Case Western allowed it, and it worked out. And she's at her dream job now. But I think that was really nice about Case Western, like giving students that opportunity to really explore their interests. And I think definitely in terms of like the environment at Case Western, it was the collaborative environment that really spoke to me. I think that we're all kind of inherently competitive, and we need to have kind of a little bit of that like inherent competition, just to kind of like with ourselves, just to push ourselves to do better and all of that. But I think I really liked that at Case, it didn't feel like I was up against any of my classmates, or that I was trying to like outcompete them or find more research opportunities than them or anything like that. It felt like, everybody's here, all these resources are open for everyone, and that we want to make sure everybody gets that opportunity. And I think I really appreciated that, because I felt much closer to my classmates, and I felt much more comfortable kind of in that environment, just knowing that we're all there for each other, that I always knew I had somebody I could call to help me with a class or give me advice on something. And I think that it's really helpful in terms of, especially in undergrad and being so far away from home, to have that kind of support.
And what about you, Gunit? What major did you, I know you touched on majors about Scripps, but can you also retell us what you majored in, and then talk to us a little bit about the environment at Scripps?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a bio major and then a dual minor in chem and feminist gender and sexuality studies. And I came in with a pre-med interest, came in knowing I'd want to explore the humanities. Scripps also has like a core curriculum, as do like all of the Claremont colleges, as do many liberal arts schools. And so we did have like a set of GEs that we were required to fulfill in like all these different kind of disciplines. So there was like there's like a language one, a religious studies one, a philosophy one, a math one, etc. And like, I feel like that really facilitated a lot of just like cross-pollination between fields that both I engaged in and a lot of my peers and friends engaged in. I think almost every single one of my friends from the Claremont colleges was a double major or a double minor in like very vastly different disciplines. So I had a lot of friends who were like STEM and econ, or like me, like STEM and gender studies, STEM and religious studies, but also like sports management and sports management and religious studies. I have a friend who did that. So just very much treading in a bunch of different worlds, but somehow like we were all doing that, and it made sense, and it made for a lot of like really great conversations and really interesting people around you in the classes you took, which was really awesome. I think in terms of like choosing what like disciplines you want to engage in, I think like some of the most helpful advice that I ever got was to take the professor, not the class, and to not tie yourself down to a discipline, to look for the advisors and the people that are in that discipline and kind of like the tangential extracurriculars, and use those things to inform your decision. Because at the end of the day, I think Durga has mentioned, like each school really has its own like unique personality and like unique culture that will really like facilitate your interests, and like will really influence what programs are strong around you, what what extracurriculars are like well funded around you, like all these things that are like logistically are important, but also at the end of the day are gonna end up being an important part of your story.
And Durga, can you talk about your major and then what the environment was like at Stanford?
Sure, yeah. So I came in as a bioengineering major. So Stanford actually doesn't let any freshmen declare right away. So even though we indicate our interest in our application, like everyone starts out undeclared. So they kind of like force you to really think about what you're studying. So my first declared major and only declared major was CS actually, because I declared closer to the end of freshman year. I mean, in terms of classes, you can take whatever you want. Basically, it's really nice that you aren't really kind of like tied to a major. Yeah, so that was in terms of the major side. In terms of like the environment, I thought it was great. It was super collaborative. Both the pre-med classes and the non-pre-med classes, like I definitely came to the pre-med classes like a little bit apprehensive about like, because you hear about like students being super competitive and all of that. I think I was just really lucky. And I thought the environment was super collaborative. A lot of us worked on our like home, like they encourage collaboration for like working on problem sets and things. So like you get to meet a lot of people through that. And then in terms of the CS computer science classes, those are also super collaborative. Most classes actually require that you do it with another student. So you like submit homework together. So you like learn to like pair program and do all these things. So in that way, I thought the environment was super nice. And yeah, there's like a ton of activities you can engage in that are both like academic and non-academic. So yeah, it was really fun. And I agree. I think those were probably the best 4 years of my life so far.
And Durga, how was the advising at your college? Did you have access to faculty? Did you have access to research? Did you find those kinds of things easy to navigate?
Yeah, so I think Stanford is kind of like known for its like research, but I think also, so I guess that's what it's kind of known for. I thought the advising was great, my personal experience. So I thought like we had a few like pre-med advisors, and we also had like pre-law advisors for students who wanted to go to law school. So I thought those advisors were very accessible. They had like weekly like drop-in office hours kind of that you could go to, or you could like schedule an appointment. A lot of our classes were taught by faculty. Actually, I guess most of them. And the ones that weren't taught by faculty were taught by like lecturers. Some of my classes, definitely the faculty like would focus on their research or like kind of integrate that into your class. So sometimes you're learning things that are very specific to what that faculty is doing research in. But on the flip side, the nice thing is that you can, if you're interested in that kind of research, you can just like approach faculty. You can definitely cold email professors, and 9 out of 10 times, if not 10 out of 10 times, they will respond. So that was kind of nice, was that it was like pretty easy to get a response from them if you just tell them that you're a student. So overall, I thought it was phenomenal advising.
And Hansa, what about you at Case Western? How was the advising? Did you have access to faculty? Did you, work with research?
Yeah, I think the advising at Case was really great. We also had a pre-med specific advisor, and so he would meet with you like on appointment basis, plus had office hours open. And he was definitely more for me was more helpful closer to when I was applying to medical school, because he went over all the schools that I was. I think it was in California, and we had like a phone meeting, and he went over all the schools, and he told me, this one, I don't know, like they tend to accept people from like this part of the country or whatever, like little things that he knew from his experience, which was super helpful because there's no point in sending applications to schools if you know that your what you have on your application isn't going to be the best fit. And I think having someone to kind of just give you that input, that insider information, is actually really helpful. So he went through the entire list with me, really helped me narrow it down. We did mock interviews for med school, and so all of that was really helpful, to do that with somebody with so much experience in the pre-health kind of advising area. We also had like faculty advisors that we could meet with, and they were really helpful for me, especially because I was doing that like dual degree situation, which was kind of hard to kind of make sure I had all my pre-med classes and I met all the requirements for two different majors. And so they worked with me, planned out my like 4 years, and every time if I like had to like put in a class in or take a class out, or I was in a class and I didn't want to do it anymore and I had to switch, they would like sit with me, work through my schedule to make sure that I would be able to graduate in 4 years. and also not have the craziest workload every single quarter or semester. So they were great in that aspect. With regards to like research, the nice thing at Case Western is you don't have too many like competing universities for the big hospitals that are in Cleveland. It's mostly just Case Western, and then I think Cleveland State is nearby, but you usually don't interact with them as much. And we had like university hospitals and Cleveland Clinic. So those are all like university hospitals is across the street, and Cleveland Clinic is about a mile away. And so all of those opportunities were kind of available, and mostly we just emailed, just cold emailed professors, and they always got back. And I did research in the OBGYN department at university hospitals, and that was just from emailing one of the professors. And then he kind of like brought me into his lab, and I would kind of go in every time I had some time, and it was more of a wet lab situation. So I would do research there. And most of our classes were also taught by faculty. So if you were interested, and if some of them were doing research, they were always open to coming and talking to you and seeing if they could kind of incorporate you into their lab and give you a role and kind of help you be a part of that. So I think it was overall, it was great to have all those faculty and advisors available all the time.
Awesome. And Gunit, how was the advising at Scripps?
Yeah, yeah, I had a really great experience with the advising as well. So the science department at Scripps is like the Keck Science Department is shared between Claremont, McKenna, Scripps, and Pitzer, which are like 3 of the 5 Claremont colleges. And so that's kind of nice because all 3 schools do attract different types of students. So your classes are definitely more of an enmeshment of like folks with different experiences, different personalities, etc. So the advising was shared. We had a really great pre-med advisor as well that, just like Hansa was mentioning, I think particularly, both when deciding what major you want to take or major you want to choose and creating your 4-year plan and all of that, kind of at the earlier stages of academic planning. But then also like really like throughout the application process, like I remember like our pre-med advisor had like their own portal, had us like basically like fill out the entire application, write all our letter of recommendation requests, write down all our like 15 activities that are like on the AMCAS application, which require more fine tuning than you would initially expect, or at least than I initially expected. Just a lot of that like pre-planning work and like allocating of time and effort was really guided by, I think, the pre-med office. We also had a really strong career center that had like money set aside for internship and research grants for students, which was really invaluable as well. I had a great time like doing research at the Claremont colleges. I worked in like an organic chemistry lab, which like really was an awesome fit, and I really loved it. But also like spent a summer doing like reproductive and sexual healthcare research at the University of Hawaii Med School. And that research was like independently funded just by like the Scripps Career Center. So definitely had like access to like a lot more opportunities because they kind of had those systems in place already. Also had a great like major and minor advisor that had like different levels of experience with students on the pre-med track. But I think also like the culture of mentorship and the culture of collaboration amongst just like the students and older students at the school was also really like a defining factor for me. The mentorship and guidance that like my older friends, TAs, folks like that provided is such a big part of the med school journey too, is like all the people who pay it forward and all your older peers and friends who help you make these like small and really big decisions sometimes.
That's great. And I think I'll have you continue this question. What kind of activities did you do in college that helped you prepare to be a good med school applicant?
Wow, college, such a like meat-filled 4 years for sure. I definitely did. I mentioned research. I also spent a lot of time as like a clinical intern through this program that was like actually in partnership with UCLA. So it was like this teaching program And I worked at like a FQHC, a federally qualified health center, like a big public hospital in the area. And yeah, just like being a clinical intern and having a lot of like interfacing time with patients, with their families, and being a part of like a direct care team was also like such an invaluable thing. I also, yeah, did some work in, have an interest in mental health care. And so did some work like both in my own community around, substance use and accessing mental health resources, and like kind of like being a part of providing pro bono resources at our local temple. And yeah, but then also did, like high school, did things that were like not necessarily pre-med. Spent a lot of time in like organizing spaces, doing like advocacy work, advocacy work with like other students of color. There was like a lot of kind of a social justice focus at the Claremont colleges, and a lot of advocacy that we were doing at like a school level. So yeah, did a lot of that work as well. Spent a lot of time at the Women's Union with women of color collectives, things like that. And those were also just like such a fruitful part of my college experience that I would like not change anything about. So yeah.
That's awesome, Guneet. It's so you too. It sounds like it was just like your complete experience, that's awesome. Durga, what about you? What kind of things did you do in college that kind of prepared you to be a good med school applicant?
Yeah. So I guess one thing, I was pretty involved with research as well. I think especially since I like kind of did more computer science involved things, I did a lot more like biocomputational kind of like research, projects. I mean, that was just something that I enjoyed doing, and I think that probably was beneficial as well on the med school like application process. In terms of like helping me really like stay pre-med, I think, and like keep like reinforcing for me that I wanted to go to med school, I think a lot of that came from I'm working at one of our free clinics. So we have 2 free clinics at Stanford. I was involved with one of them for like most of, I guess, like from freshman year till the end. And it was really cool. Like you got to like do the patient interview independently, take some vitals, present. And I think that was also really helpful even coming into medical school. I think that background was was a good way to like ease into first year and things like that. But for me, that was really, I think, really important for helping me, like reminding me that I wanted to go to med school and like why I wanted to go to med school. Because I think in college you also like see that there's so many different opportunities out there, and I think it was really helpful for me to like know that yes, I still want to go to med school, and these are things that I really enjoy doing and that are meaningful for me, and like that's why I'm pre-med. So for me, that was really important. But yeah, also outside of that, I did a lot of non-med things as well. Pretty involved with a lot of music things, theater. That was like really fun. I was pretty involved with that in undergrad. And I think, yeah, those are like cool ways to meet new people. Also to meet people who are like outside your major or areas that you're studying. I think that's where I met a lot of people who aren't necessarily majoring in like STEM fields. So yeah, that was really fun. A solid 4 years.
Awesome. And Hansa, how did you prepare to be a good med school applicant at Case?
Yeah, I definitely I think the theme with Guneet and Durga too is that, a lot of the things I did, like half of them maybe were medicine related or STEM related, but the other half are completely not related to anything medicine. And I think that was a good balance kind of in undergrad, like having a little bit of both. So I did some research too. I wasn't super heavily involved in research, but I did some research in the first few, like 3 out of the 4 years, I would say, in like the OBGYN department at the hospital. It wasn't necessarily like an everyday thing, but I'd pop in and out whenever I had time and, be a part of small projects. And for me, on more than just the research, I also, because it was OBGYN and I was kind of interested in women's health, it allowed me to like jump into C-sections and like observe. And so I like that aspect of being a part of that lab because I was able to get into like the OR a little bit more to see if I really did like women's health. Is this, can I handle like being in an OR, that kind of thing. So I really like that. I also tried to shadow whenever I could, during summer breaks or even while I was still at Case, just every time there was an opportunity, I would try to just pop in, just, really to make sure like, okay, is pre-med really for me? Is applying to medical school really going to be what I wanted to do? And then our school had a really cool like EMS organization. So I got my EMT license while I was an undergrad, and I was on the campus like EMS team. So we do like some overnight shifts every once in a while. It wasn't anything crazy, but it was kind of cool to be a part, like be called like at 3 in the morning and take the ambulance over and help whoever needed help and really feel like you're a doctor sort of. So that was really nice. And those things really helped me kind of figure out that pre-med was what I wanted to do. But I also really, when I went into undergrad, I wanted to make sure that I did try things that weren't necessarily to put on my application, but things that just made me happy and things that I've always wanted to do, but always felt like, no, like it's not going to be good on the application or that I didn't have time. So I wanted to prioritize that. So I joined our Bhangra dance team, and best decision I've ever made. It was amazing. A lot of time, but the best connections that I've had, like I'm like, those are lifelong friends. I was on the team for all 4 years. We traveled like every couple of months all over the country, and it was just so fun to have that little escape. Because college, yeah, the classes are hard and sometimes you're studying a lot, and it's really nice to have something that you do on the side that's really fun and just kind of for you. So I think that was a big decision when I went in, but I'm so grateful that I made that decision because I mean, people have asked me about it on my med school interviews because it's interesting, and I didn't even do it for that purpose. I did it just for me. But it was just nice to see that, like, it was nice that I could do something that's not just medicine related. And I also liked working with children, so I volunteered at the Children's Hospital every once in a while, just because that's also something that made me happy. So I definitely agree with the Gunganeeth. Like, you definitely want to make sure that you do things that both make you happy, that aren't meant to just put on your resume, and then also have some other things on the side to explore medicine, just to make sure that it's really the right decision for you.
Those are awesome. And I think it's so valuable to hear that you girls did something other than just like focusing on med school and really tried to like implement that balance throughout college and beyond. So when you started, our next question, and we'll start with Hansa. When you started researching medical schools, when do you start that timeline, and how did you go about finding the right fit medical school for you?
Yeah, I think I might be a little rusty on when this happened because I mean it happened relatively recently, but still it's been a while. But I think the applications are due, like, could be wrong, like, no, end of the year, and then usually you want to have your essays and things done earlier because you just want to like get everything out quickly. So I tried to kind of do things way earlier than I needed to, just so that I wouldn't have to like be stressed at the end. So I started like earlier in, I think, my third year. Wow, this is a long time. I can't really remember, but I started kind of early, several months before applications were due. And I think what I was looking for in terms of medical schools was I was applying broadly. I applied to like California schools because I wanted to come back to California. But I also applied to a lot of schools on the East Coast. And for me, like, I know for me personally, I don't like to be in places that are like kind of more remote, in terms of like not really near big cities or things like that. Like, for me, I like to be near where there's like a lot happening, there's a lot of people. And so I use geography kind of as a deciding factor. So I was like, I'd be okay living in Boston. I'd be okay living in Miami. I'd be okay in Chicago. California, definitely, because I family's there. So I picked stuff like that where I knew I would have a good support system, where I would be able to do things that would help me kind of relax. And so, sorry, my roommate's dog is going crazy, but so excuse the barking. But yeah, so I kind of mostly use geography, and so that's what I initially kind of used. Then I went through each program's website, and just saw that do they have like opportunities. Like, I'm interested in global health, and so I really focused on, do they have opportunities for me to travel or do things like that? Do they have a strong women's health kind of program or organizations that I could be a part of that would help me kind of foster those interests? And so I initially I started off with a huge list, and then based on location, and then I narrowed it down based off of what I was interested in each specific program.
That's great. And we're also joined by phone. Lakshana is on, which is Excellent. Hi, Lakshana. Thanks for meeting us. I'm sorry that the hospital was stressful this morning.
Hi, it's good to hear everyone. I guess I'll start off with just a quick introduction about myself.
Sure.
My name is Lakshana. I am currently a general surgery resident here in New York. Initially, I thought I would be free today, but unfortunately, we had an urgent case, hence the delay. But I did my undergrad at Drexel, and I also ended up doing medical school at Drexel as well. So I think I was interested in surgery after my surgery rotation as a third year in med school, and I just sort of decided to pursue that. So but I applied broadly when I did, and I was super excited when I matched in New York because it's like the place where I get to see a lot of diverse cases with just a variety of different patient populations. So it's been a lot of learning and a lot of hours, but it's been pretty rewarding so far.
That's awesome. Our format, we're just kind of going through some of these questions. And so our question right now is like, how did you prepare to be a good med school applicant?
Okay. My path.
Yeah, your Drexel was a combined program, yeah?
Yes. So I guess my path was a little bit different in terms of like med school, but I can sort of talk about how, like, what I did in med school for residency.
Perfect.
So in med school, the first 2 years are mainly like just learning anatomy and physiology and pathology. So because once you get into med school, you guys, like, all the students are sort of the cream of the crop. Like, you guys got into med school because you have the academics and the work ethic to be there. And to stand out within med school, I realized that I had to start branching out and finding things that I was interested in outside of just the academic aspect. So I began to branch out, and I started volunteering at a place within Philadelphia. It's a Boys and Girls Club where I got to tutor middle school kids a couple days a week and just be able to get in touch and like understand how the community that I lived in worked and how the schools worked and how kids interacted with one another, which I think was very eye-opening. Being from California, like, the environment from California to Philly was very different, and it was a lot for me to take in initially. And in medical school, being able to work with that patient population really helped me understand, like, the disparities that a lot of the kids in the inner cities were facing. I also ended up spending my summer after first year working at a kids' summer camp and teaching kids just like basic things about eating healthy. Like, a lot of these kids didn't really know what smoothies were or why they were healthy. And so being able to teach them that, like, yeah, you can still teach them healthy habits, whether it's exercising every day or, eating something green, like, for lunch. I felt like that was a very eye-opening experience, and it helped me realize how difficult it is for families, especially in inner cities, to get the food that they need in order to, like, have good nutrition. So I focused a lot on, like, working within the community that I went to school in. And I also did a little bit of research on the side basic genetics research to show that I could still, like, that I was interested in lab work and, you know, asking questions and constantly trying to improve myself and staying on top of like up-to-date topics. But for me, I think the biggest aspect was creating a network of having a network of mentors, whether it's like professors that I worked with or attending doctors that I met while I was rotating at hospitals, and staying in touch with them and making sure that they knew who I was and the kind of doctor that I wanted to be, so that they could write me letters of recommendations and reach out to the people, like program directors that they knew, in order to be able to get interviews or get away rotations. So just a little bit of like how I went about med school.
That's awesome. Okay, so let me ask you this for each. Oh, sorry, I need to go with Gunit. Tell me about finding the right fit med school for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, wow, finding the right fit med school. I like Hansa and Lakshana kind of talked about. I also applied pretty broadly. Yeah, I would say, let me start here. I feel like some of the really helpful advice I got early on was to really, yeah, just like to plan early, have a good sense of like from early on, and, you know, plan with flexibility and give yourself space for like life to take over. But I think it was really helpful to just have a sense of like, cool, I want to take this is how much time I want to take off. So for me to like, if that's my endpoint, this is where I want to fit the MCAT in. And then like, maybe if I want to retake the MCAT at some point, like here's a little bit of buffer time for me to fit that in as well. So just like having that plan and that timeline kind of early on, I think is really valuable. Yeah, and then as far as like the actual application process, yeah, I also applied really broadly. From California, wanted to stay in California, also was in New York at the time and like loved the East Coast. And so also applied to schools out there. Definitely used geography as well. Like Hansa said, like knew I wanted to be, knew that this was 4 years of life, knew I wanted to be in a diverse city. I knew I wanted to be in a city that had a culture around being outdoors. Like those are just like personal interests, things like that. But then also, yeah, also like had a sense of kind of like what my like reach or dream schools would be, what my more like target range was, kind of use stats and like school culture to inform a lot of that. I feel like you can really tell what a med school wants and values based off of what they choose to fund. And so like looking at both their mission statement and like their website, but also kind of like their news and like what programs they're really choosing to highlight within the med school, things like that can be really helpful in kind of choosing what program would be a good fit for you. In the end, I chose UCLA because it was near my community back in California, and also like having spent time in SoCal, having a strong support system here. It was a school that really had a strong kind of like medical humanities and academic medicine focus, which are things that I'm interested in, but also really had like a lot of opportunities to explore like patient care for marginalized patients that really like went beyond kind of just like the healthcare disparities public health approach. So had a lot of focus on like community partnerships and like really funneling resources to like orgs in our surrounding communities that are really doing this work already, and straying a little bit away from, you know, wanting to come in and wanting to come into these communities and kind of like spearhead and like pioneer new things. So like having a lot of those like structurally competent and yeah, structurally competent, like mission and values was a big part. But yeah, I think also along the interview trail, the interview trail is like such a fun and rewarding time as well. Even though you are like, yeah, even though it's a stressful time and it's a time of a lot of pressure, you get a really good sense of like what type of personalities each med school attracts, what type of students are there. UCLA, the students seemed like really laid back and chill and like here because they loved medicine and like they loved a profession that is like geared towards service. And so that's also one of the really big things I remember from kind of interviewing here.
That's awesome. And Durga, what about you? How did you go about finding the right fit medical school?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said so far. So I guess the only thing I'll add would be in terms of planning, deciding, I think the earlier you can decide whether or not you're going to take time off, and if so, how much time you want to take off between med school and undergrad would be useful. So I mean, I guess since I came in knowing that I was I came in pre-med and knew that I wanted to go to med school. So I was able to like plan from then in terms of when I'm going to take my classes, etc. I ended up not taking any time off in between med school and undergrad. So basically what that looks like is that around December of your junior year in college, I would say is when you should really start thinking about applying. So that means by then you should have already taken your MCAT and feel comfortable with your score. And then you basically apply a year before you get in. So like I submitted my application in June of my third year. So I guess right after I'd finished my third year. And that was so that I could start right after I graduated. And so the one thing to keep in mind if you don't take any time off is that you'll be interviewing at the same time as doing senior year of college. So that means that if your interviews are earlier in the summer, then that's more free time, but especially fall quarter can get really tight because you're like applying, sometimes filling out like scholarship applications and then like interviewing and like doing all the interview things at the same time as also being in school. So I think that's something to plan for if you decide not to take any time off. But that's kind of how it works. And then by like winter quarter, most of the interviews are kind of done, and then you have some time to decide where you want to go. And yeah, I completely agree. The interview days are great ways to figure out how the school, like what the school values. And I guess because of COVID for our year, we didn't have the opportunity to go back for a second look. So that's kind of what I used to really base my decision. And yeah, very happy here.
Great. I'm going to interject a little bit because we have some questions from the audience. And so I'm going to say the question and then Jenny will kind of direct and have you answer them. And I first off wanted to say thank you so much for being here and for sharing your experiences. You have no idea how valuable. I mean, I'm over here writing down these little bits of wisdom that have come out of each one of you, so that we can continue to share them with our students. And I just want to profoundly thank you for joining us today. Our first audience question is, do you have any advice about finding ways to immerse yourself in the medical field as a high schooler? So maybe not just things that you did, but things that you might recommend that a high schooler do. And I would guess that part of that question too is, what does that look like sort of coming out of COVID?
So Hansa, why don't you start?
Okay, I guess I don't know how to answer that in terms of coming out of COVID, just because I this is like a completely different experience for all the students, I'm sure. But I guess in general, what I think, as a high school student, there's not much like actual like patient care that you'd be able to do just because of like the level of training. But I think trying to get as many shadowing opportunities as possible would be a really good way to immerse yourself in medicine, but also see what you like about medicine and what you don't like. So, instead of, I wouldn't pick just like one specialty when you shadow, because I remember like I did a lot of shadowing in OBGYN because I really liked women's health, but I also did shadowing in pediatrics and just to see, I'm like, I like kids, but do I want to just only see kids in my practice, or do I want to do something else? And so I think just if you had like a few different specialties, just email a doctor or call a doctor, be like, hi, I'm a high school student. I just wanted to come by and maybe shadow you in clinic for a couple of days. It doesn't have to be like a month-long thing. It could just be like a week and you pop in maybe a couple of times, a few hours, see the different patients they see, and see if like that's something that you'd be interested in. I think it would probably be the easiest way to get in as like a medical student. I mean, as a high school student, in terms of getting medical experience. I also think volunteering at a hospital gives you a lot of really valuable exposure. I volunteered at El Camino Hospital in Mountain View, I believe. And so I was on labor and delivery, and I didn't really, I would just like wheel patients out or go and check in on the moms after they had their babies. And I think just seeing what it's like on that floor, seeing the doctors check in on the patients, and doing that kind of stuff was really helpful. I also spent some time in the same hospital being on like their telemetry floor, where it's a lot like more sicker patients, older patients. And they were trying to do like a fall prevention initiative. So they'd want me to go and like make sure everything was like the bed alarm was on, the patient had their fall proof socks on, all that kind of stuff, which is kind of cool. Like you have a role, you have a job. But it showed me that I really didn't feel super great working, in that environment. Like I felt really sad all the time because the patients were so sick. And it kind of helped direct me in terms of what I wanted to do as a doctor, in terms of specialty, in terms of whether I wanted to do in hospital, out of hospital. And so I think those little tidbits that you get, just more of like a feeling, is really valuable even as a high schooler. And trying to get yourself just at any opportunity, just to even be in a hospital, I think is extremely valuable, and probably easier to do, hopefully now that people are getting vaccinated, that you can kind of get back into actually seeing patients.
Durga, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think in terms of with respect to coming out of COVID, I think this summer, I'm hoping they'll start easing more restrictions in terms of who is able to get into the hospital for like volunteer roles. So I mean, there's no way to predict anything, but I'm guessing hopefully by fall, it should be like more of a situation where like high schoolers can get back into like clinical environments. I would say try to be as active as you can when you're there. So like even if you're shadowing, like obviously don't overwhelm them with questions or bother them when they're doing something important. But like, if you see like another medical professional standing nearby, ask them like what is happening. Like try to learn more about what's happening. And even when you're volunteering, like be as active as you can. I think in your role, I think you'll gain the most out of it and it'll be really helpful. And also research is always there if you're interested. Those could be experiences that don't involve being in person and are more conducive during COVID times.
And Gunit, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think what Durga said about like being active, I definitely second that. Just like all these experiences are really what you make of them. Shadowing can be really, really passive, or it can be a really great way to have some awesome conversations and learn things and think about things that you really wouldn't have if you weren't in that setting. And I think also just like the act of being in that setting, even though sometimes like, yeah, shadowing as a high schooler, you're wheeling patients or like just knocking and checking in on doors and stuff. And it's not Grey's Anatomy, but it's still just being in that space and hearing the medical professionals around you talk about these cases and talk about the patient care is all really valuable information to take in. And then I just wanted to add that also like there's so many COVID oriented service projects right now that like many of my mentees who are like more undergrads are involved in. There's like a lot of initiatives to just like spread education, to get vaccines to as many people as possible. There's a lot of community clinics that are like are like offering free vaccines that you can go volunteer at and just like register folks for, or like be in the background and like refill supplies and things like that. And so I think even finding ways to this is just like such an important like moment in like public health history. And I think even finding like entry points to be a part of kind of like the movement to like overcome COVID is also such an important opportunity right now and important work right now.
Are we up for our next question? All right. So the next question is, could you explain the difference between double major and minor and how you figured out which of your interests you chose as your majors versus your minors?
Okay, Guni, why don't you start with this one?
Yeah, great question. When I was at Scripps, like I think this is a really school specific question too. At the Claremont colleges, your majors are really defined by like whether or not you're going to write a thesis. So every undergraduate student writes a thesis for everything that they major in. And that's like a really big part of the liberal arts experience, and is also like a really great research opportunity. And so I chose to, like, I originally wanted to double major in like gender studies and bio, but just like the writing two separate theses was a lot, given like my med school timeline, and it was like not something I had capacity for. And then you also have like some schools will offer an opportunity to do like a dual major, so like double versus dual. Again, these like wordplay intricacies are probably very different at Stanford and Case than they were at Scripps, but at least in our context, like a dual major meant you wrote one integrated thesis on both topics. And yeah, so that's like another option. I chose to minor just because, and I ended up taking more classes than a minor required, but just because like I wanted to be in that space, but didn't necessarily have like the capacity or the time, given my like other academic goals of like wanting to pursue pre-med, to like really write a whole other thesis. Yeah.
And Hansa, what about you?
Yeah, I think it's definitely, like Gunita was saying, very school specific. So at Case, like they didn't have a Bachelor of Science in psychology. If they did, I would have been a double major. But they only had Bachelor of Arts, so I ended up having to do like a dual degree. And I think it really just depends on what your schedule looks like. Thankfully for me, I think the AP classes that I took and like the AP exams really helped cover a lot of the GE general class requirements that they had at Case, and so I didn't have to take a lot of those classes, which opened up my schedule to be able to fit in like psychology as well. So it really just depends, I think, on how many classes you want to have in each quarter or each semester, how many classes you need for pre-med and for your main major. And if you can fit in another major, great. If your schedule doesn't really allow it, then the minor is like another option where you still get to really take a lot of the classes that you want, but in case you don't have the room to take the entire set of classes that you would need for a major, you could minor in that same special degree. So I think it really just depends on what your school offers and kind of what your schedule looks like, and you kind of have to it's kind of like a continuous like throughout undergrad. It's not something you can really determine day one. You'll just have to kind of work with it and add classes here, take classes over, take classes out. And then as you get to closer to like sophomore year, you'll have a better idea of what you can actually fit. But it's kind of a little puzzle, I guess, throughout undergrad.
And Durga, what about you?
Yeah, so I actually didn't double major or minor. I did the CS major, which my classes were very different from the pre-med requirements. So like doing like my pre-med classes was almost like a kind of felt like a minor. But yeah, I decided not to do it also because I wanted some more time in my schedule to do things like go abroad or like have that freedom in my senior year to actually be able to apply to med school and things like that. So yeah, I didn't end up double majoring or minoring.
Great. I love this next question. The next question is, did you have any insecurities before applying to med school? And if so, how did you overcome them? So I might even open that up, like at any point in the process when when you're thinking that being a doctor is the end goal, were there moments of sort of, what am I doing? And what helped you through it?
Hansa, why don't you start?
Sure. I think definitely. I think 100%. Lots of times where there were insecurities. I think kind of throughout the process, like going from like undergrad to med school, and then for me, like med school to residency. There's always moments where you feel like, oh my God, like am I going to be able to do this? Can I handle this? Especially when you're really busy in undergrad with all your classes and you're trying to work on your med school applications. You're here trying to see if you're getting interviews. It's a stressful process for sure. And I think it's completely natural to feel like I don't know if I can do this, and I'm not sure if I'm cut out for this. But I think what helped me is just realizing that, I'm definitely not the only one going through this, and it's okay that I'm feeling this way. It's not something about me or what skills I have or what my application looks like. It's just, this is like a part of the process, and it's something that you have to just realize that it's not about you. Like, you're skilled, you've worked really hard, you've done all of these things in undergrad. There's no perfect application to get into medical school, and your application is just a reflection of your experiences. And as long as you're proud of what you've done and you're happy with what you've done, that's all that you need to take to the table. And it takes a while to kind of, you don't really feel that until almost at the end of the whole medical school application process. The whole time you always feel like there's something missing, or you could have done more. But I think just, and I guess hearing from us, like, hindsight, I realized, like, you always have done enough, right? Like, everything you've done, as long as you were happy with it and that you're proud of what you've done, whatever you've done is enough. And where you end up is going to be the perfect place for you. And it doesn't have to be like, the number one school or the number, whatever, it doesn't have to be like that. It has to be where, where they appreciate what you've done, and they look at what you've done, and they are happy about it too. And that's the perfect fit. So just realizing that, that what you have done is enough, and that you've done a lot and you've worked really hard, and that it's going to work out one way or the other. And if it's a little bit difficult and if the pathway is a little rocky, that's okay. But eventually, if you really want to be a doctor, you're going to be a doctor one way or the other. And so just kind of pushing through those insecurities and trying to tell yourself that it's all going to work out and it's all going to be fine. And lean on all your other, like, classmates too. Like, that's really what I did. Everyone else who was also applying, they all have the same insecurities, and being able to talk about it with each other, I think, is really helpful to kind of decompress and kind of push through that.
Gunit, any insecurities?
Yeah, just like Hansa said, that is such a normal and natural part of the process, that like literally any stage. I think what was most helpful for me is like, yeah, just like Hansa said, like really leaning on your support system and your network. Have like, find good mentors in your life that can guide you, like whether those be professors or like folks you've shadowed, doctors or like folks who are not in medicine also. Like just, yeah, make sure you have kind of have your team, and then also like, yeah, have your friends, your older students, older med students in your life who are further along in the process, and really like lean on them for insights. And also just like, sometimes you just need someone to talk you out of your head. And because it's so easy, it is a really numbers geared process. You're going to look at your stats, you're going to look at the stats of all the schools that are out there, and like, like stats can always be a 0.01 higher or 1 point higher, and all those things. And that's just the nature that's just the nature of the game, kind of. So just, yeah, I would say like, make sure you have the network that can like allow you to just kind of take a step back from that and remind you of looking at your story in the full picture of who you are and the full picture of your application process. And yeah, also have like develop good tools for stress relief early on. Yeah, like I just like can't stress that enough, even when you do get to med school, because like having those tools to like decompress and just like take care of yourself is just such an important part of like not burning out. Whether that's working out, spending time with friends, music, all those things. That is also like just as important of a part of the process, I would say.
And Durga, what about you?
Yeah, it's a very stressful process, and I don't think it ever becomes less stressful or stress-free. I think. So just putting that out there now. But yeah, I think I agree with everything. I think like a support system is really important, especially when I was applying. I think my friends who were not in medicine, that was a great support system to just have a different perspective when everyone is like stressing about these things, and you kind of realize that maybe those things aren't actually that important in the big scheme of things. So I think support system is really, really important. And yeah, I think, yeah, like med school, it doesn't like, the stress doesn't stop. Like, I think the transition to med school was also rough, and like you like have to adjust to that. So I think like having a strong support system and having some really good stress reduction or just like strategies for keeping yourself happy is, I think, really important as you go through the process, because medicine is like inherently like a stressful, like I think I would say a stressful profession, because you have so much kind of responsibility and so much that you need to do well, and so much that you need to know. Um, but with a good support system, I think we can all do great.
So we had a last question that was actually geographically focused, but I think the question is still very valid, which is it easy for undergrad students to get involved in hospitals? And this one was specifically asking about Philadelphia, but I think it's a valid question in terms of, was it relatively easy for you to find ways to get sort of connected with hospitals as an undergrad?
I'm going to answer for Lakshana because this is something we've talked about before, because Drexel was a very unique situation since it was a co-op school, and a lot of times their classes were flipped. So they had their classes previously recorded, and they would attend, students there attend classes in the evenings with a pre-recorded kind of lecture, so that they had opportunities to be able to shadow and volunteer in the hospitals there. And that's something that we had discussed, and she said was actually really hard to adjust to when she first got into school, because you were working all day and then you would come in at night and have to like focus for your classes. But there were a lot of opportunities in a lot of hospitals for her to be able to volunteer, because Drexel partnered with a lot of those places in the greater Philadelphia area. So there's lots of opportunities there. So why don't we have Durga at UCLA this year? Are there a lot of opportunities for you to volunteer, or how has that been with COVID?
Yeah, so I think because of COVID, they've limited our, I guess, some of our shadowing opportunities. My clinical site is one of the homeless clinics that we have here at UCLA. So that's been a cool way to, I think, continue, like, be able to do some like clinical work and care for some of our unhoused residents here. So that's kind of what I've been involved with on the clinical side.
Sorry, Guni, what about you at Scripps? Was it easy to get involved in hospitals in your area?
Yeah, I did this kind of like teaching program in undergrad called Cope Health Scholars, and it's like based out of Southern California. And so, yeah, there were a lot of folks at like USC, UCLA, kind of like in partnership with a bunch of different hospitals in the area. And that was that's where I would say I got the majority of my clinical experience. And it was kind of one of those like special programs that was geared towards like providing undergrads that experience. And so yeah, we went through like a rigorous training. We're able to take vital signs, ambulate patients, like kind of do a lot of like the basic patient care tasks. But yeah, I think finding like a formalized program that like allows you some structure and like some structure around like training and being in hospital spaces was a really big, like, it was a huge plus in my experience.
And Hansa, I know you touched on this a little bit earlier, but what was your experience in undergrad like, being able to shadow and get into some hospitals locally in Cleveland?
Yeah, I think definitely it was a huge advantage being one of the only universities with such a huge health system kind of available. So it definitely made it a little bit easier, I think, just having that opportunity. But when I tried to do shadowing over the summers, I mean, it can be difficult. Like, I just emailed a lot of doctors. I called so many different offices, and it takes a while. Like, I mean, I called like 50, 60 different clinics and emailed a whole bunch of people. And then, everyone's really busy. Not everyone's, has the kind of structure in their clinic to allow for an undergrad student to come shadow or be a part of their clinic. And so it does take a little bit of extra work, I think, but definitely like asking around, seeing if other people have doctors that they've shadowed. It's a huge resource, because then like this doctor definitely can take someone in. And so reaching out to those particular physicians or those particular clinics is a good way as well, to try to get some opportunities. But a lot of it is just really either meeting these physicians in person and talking to them in person about maybe joining their clinic for a day or being a part of the research project, is really important when you're in undergrad, because a lot of your faculty do have research projects on the side. And so if that's something you're interested in, like not being like nervous to go and ask them, just go ahead and ask them. The worst thing they can say is no, sorry, I don't have space, right? So you just might have to ask maybe 10 different faculty, but you'll get one of those projects will work out. So I think you'll just keep at it until you find that spot.
Great. So we are sort of in the wrap up piece of this. We've gotten to all of our questions. And so Jenny, I was going to let you ask the final question.
So what do you think is one piece of advice you would give to students or people considering medicine or considering, going into this field? And we'll start with Gunit.
Yeah, I think just own your story, like own your experiences, own who you are, and just like trust in all the experiences that you've had. I think like one of the really big like learning points for me throughout the application process was just that like medical schools value really, really diverse and varied things. Like even like you can tell that from even just the cohort that ended up like as their organized classmates. We have peers that have had like the biggest range of life experiences. So just like, yeah, don't be afraid to try something new. Don't be afraid to do something that's like unconventional or not a part of that path. And then also just like remember your why. Like hang on to those experiences that really like remind you why you think medicine is the end goal for you, and like come back to those in the moments of stress or the moments of insecurity, and like remind yourself that this is like the process is joyful and rewarding and can be all those things at the same time.
Awesome. What about you, Durga?
Yeah, I guess I'll kind of wrap this into also kind of advice for college and those 4 years. And I think my biggest piece of advice would be to really go meet as many people as you can in settings that you really enjoy, or settings that you want to be in, because I think those people that you meet in those 4 years are people you're going to stay in touch with for a really long time. And they're going to do a lot of really cool things. And I think those connections that you form and those like friendships that you make in college are really going to shape, I think, the way that you see a lot of things and the way that just like your life moving forward. So I would say really get involved with different things and like meet new people, and don't be afraid to do that and really put yourself out there. Because I think, and final thing is like have fun. I think that's like something that we sometimes like forget to tell ourselves, but like it's super important. And I think like the more fun you have, the more productive you are also, in my opinion. So yeah, go and have some fun and go meet some new people.
And last but not least, Hansa, any advice?
I definitely second everything that Durga and Gunit were saying. I think for me, it would just be like, do what makes you happy. Because at the end of the day, this is a long process, and you want to be happy while you're going through all these years of training and all these years of like working. And so make sure you always like check in with yourself and you see where you're at, and do things that make you happy, whether it's the specialty you choose, whether it's just medicine in general versus another career. Pick something where you know that you would feel happy doing this for the rest of your life. And have fun, because none of these specialties, even if it's busy, there's always room to have fun, and you can only do well at work if you yourself feel good, and that and if you're well rested and you feel relaxed and you're happy. So definitely prioritize that. And I definitely, for college, I would say, like Durga was saying, meet as many people as you can. Usually, I think they told me the first 2 weeks when you go to college, like that's the time you really got to push yourself to meet and talk to anybody and everybody, because your friends are going to be your support system, both through college and even through med school. Like my undergrad friends got me through med school too. And I have med school friends that I'm really close to, but I still to this day talk to my undergrad friends every time I'm having like a rough day at work or anything like that. And they're the first ones I text. We video chat regularly, and it's been years. It's been almost like 8 years since I've met them. And so the people you meet in college and the people you meet along the way are your support system. And I think prioritize that and invest in your support system, because that's kind of what helps guide you throughout the however many years your process takes. And one last thing I guess I would say is don't compare yourself or your journey with anyone else, because you're you, it's your unique experiences. It's, everyone's journey is important. Everyone's journey is different, and it's great in its own way. So just kind of, own that and be okay knowing that your journey is going to be completely different from this other student who's applying to medical school, and that's okay. You don't have to have the same resume. You don't have to have done the same things. Just be happy and own what you've done. And that's what they look for too, in terms they just want people who are proud of what they've done and are happy with what they've done. And that's what stood out to me in interviews in med school, is when they asked me about my dance experience over the research I've done or the classes I've taken, because they're like, that's more interesting. Why'd you do that? That was so fun. Did you have any crazy, travel stories? And I think that just shows you that they want people who really are just happy with what they've done and are really okay with their story. And so just own what you've done. Don't compare yourself, and everyone's going to do great, and you're all going to end up where you want to be. And I think it's all going to work out.
You ladies are awesome. I'm so thankful that you were able to make it today, and we truly appreciate this, because it is so valuable. Are there anything else that you guys want to add? We just want to say thank you so much. I'm so thankful to have been able to have, my A through Fs at Lynbrook. You guys you're awesome. So thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having us.
Yeah, it was
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Thank you for sharing.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. It was nice speaking to all of you guys.
Yeah.